Okay, so picture this. It's late January 2026. You're scrolling through the news, and you see this bulletin from Beijing.
Right.
The Chinese Ministry of National Defense announces an investigation into a General Zhang Yuxia.
And if you're just skimming, you'd probably just keep going.
Exactly. Another day, another official caught in the anti-corruption net, right?
That is precisely what they want you to think. But if you stop scrolling, if you actually look at that name, you realize this isn't just another official. This is an earthquake.
And that's what we're digging into today. Because this specific purge, and we should call it a purge, is arguably the biggest military shakeup in China in 50 years.
At least.
We have to unpack who this general is, why his removal is sending these shockwaves through intelligence agencies all over the world. And we have to talk about this viral, kind of mysterious open letter.
A letter that claims to tell the real story.
It's a story that involves what? Nuclear secrets, a potential invasion of Taiwan in 2027.
And, a really fundamental question. Has Xi Jinping finally secured absolute control, or has he just broken the very machine that keeps him in power?
So let's start with the basics. For anyone who doesn't have the PLA's org chart memorized, who is General Zhang Yuxia?
Well, to understand Zhang, you have to understand the hierarchy. He wasn't just a general. He was the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, the CMC.
And the CMC isn't just some committee, right? It's the real center of power.
It is the power. In China, the CMC is the supreme command. It controls everything with a gun. The army, the armed police, the militia, everything.
Xi Jinping is the chairman.
And Zhang Yuxia was the vice chairman. So he was, for all intents and purposes, the second most powerful man in the entire Chinese military.
So this is like the U.S. president firing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but with a lot more political weight behind it.
Oh, much more. Because Zhang wasn't just a high-ranking officer. He was what you call red nobility. A princeling, or the red second generation. His father, Zhang Zonsin, was a legendary general who fought right alongside Xi Jinping's own father, the Civil War.
Wow, so their families have a blood bond. It goes back generations.
Exactly. And that usually buys you a lifetime of protection.
Mhm.
But, Zhang had something else, something that even Xi doesn't have.
Actual combat experience.
Actual combat experience. He fought in the Sino-Vietnamese War in '79 and the Battle of Laoshan in '84.
Which is incredibly rare in today's PLA. I mean, most of the top brass are career administrators, political guys.
Correct. Zhang was the real deal. He had, as they say, blood on his bayonet, and that gave him immense respect among the rank and file. He represented the army faction, the traditional land power.
And yet, despite the family history, despite the medals, he was just erased. The sources we looked at describe this really cinematic timeline for how it happened.
It's fascinating. It shows you how Chinese politics really works. It's all signals.
He disappeared from public view in November 2025, but the real signal came in January, at a funeral.
Yes. On January 17th, 2026, a memorial service for a high-ranking official. A flower wreath had been sent in Zhang Yuxia's name, and it was placed right up front.
Okay.
Then in the middle of the ceremony, officials just walk over and physically remove it.
That is so dramatic. It's like something out of a gangster movie.
It's ritual humiliation. In that political culture, having your wreath removed is a public declaration of your social death. It tells everyone in that room that this person is a non-entity. He is gone.
And then a week later, the official announcement comes.
A week later,
Cool.
January 24th, the ministry confirms investigations into Zhang and also Liu Zhenli, the chief of joint staff, for serious discipline violations.
Which is the standard code for corruption.
Always.
And to be fair, he did run the equipment development department for a long time.
He did. And that's the most lucrative department in the entire military. Procurement. Everything from bullets to ballistic missiles is where all the money is.
We saw that with the rocket force purges back in 2023, didn't we?
Yeah.
That trail led right back to procurement.
It did. So on the surface, the charge is probably that he was presiding over this massive system of graft.
But corruption is so often just the tool you use to get rid of a political problem. There were some darker rumors, too. The Wall Street Journal reported he was accused of leaking nuclear secrets.
That's the blockbuster allegation, at least in the Western media. That he might have compromised nuclear silo coordinates, operational details, but we really need to put a big asterisk on that one.
Why is that?
Well, logistically, it's a bit of a strange accusation. I mean, a guy in his position doesn't need to hand over coordinates. The U.S. has satellites that can watch them pour the concrete.
Right.
Plus, it feels convenient. It's the kind of charge you would invent to make absolutely sure the public sees him as a traitor, not as some kind of political martyr.
Okay, so this brings us to the centerpiece of our deep dive, this open letter. This thing has been all over Reddit, the dark web, and it's being scrubbed from Chinese social media as fast as it appears.
A letter that claims to be from General Zhang himself to Xi Jinping.
Now, before we even get into what it says, we have to talk about authenticity. I mean, did he actually sit in a jail cell and write this?
I'm most certainly not.
They usually take your pen away first.
Exactly. But analysts like Li's Real Talk and other China watchers, they make a pretty compelling case that even if Zhang didn't hold the pen, it very likely comes from his inner circle.
How so?
It contains these really specific details, like it refutes that nuclear leak charge before that charge was even really public knowledge.
Yeah.
It feels like the voice of a desperate faction inside the military trying to get their side of the story out.
So if we assume this reflects his mindset, what does it say? Because the language is just scorching.
It's absolutely blistering. The letter explicitly compares Xi Jinping's government to Kim Jong-un's North Korea.
I mean, in Beijing, that's the ultimate insult.
It is. It describes this scene where officials are all standing up, applauding Xi, and the author writes he felt disgusted and uneasy. It accuses Xi of turning the People's Army into his personal army.
And it goes after this idea of the chairman responsibility system, right? We see that phrase a lot in official documents, but what does it actually mean?
On paper, it just means the chairman of the CMC, so Xi, has the final say. But the letter argues that under Xi, it's morphed into what it calls paternalistic micromanagement.
Meaning nothing moves without his personal signature?
Not a tank, not a truck, not a single promotion. The letter claims this system is paralyzing the entire military.
And there's an incredible admission in there. The writer says, I had the means to stage a military coup, but I resolutely refused.
That's his defense, you see. He's saying, I wasn't weak, I was moral. He claims he refused because a coup would have led to a civil war. He's trying to frame himself as a patriot taken down by a dictator.
Not a corrupt official.
Exactly. And on that nuclear leak charge we mentioned, the letter just laughs at it. It literally asks, why would I leak silo locations? The Americans already know where they are.
He frames it as a complete fabrication.
A pretext.
But the most critical part of this letter, the part that really matters to everyone listening, is the disagreement over war, over Taiwan.
This is where it all comes together. The purge isn't just about money or insults. It's about strategy. The sources point to this massive rift over the timeline for reunification.
And we've all heard that date, 2027. It marks the end of Xi's fourth term and the 100th anniversary of the PLA.
Right. Xi has ordered the military to be ready by 2027. But what the letter and the analysis around it suggest is that Zhang Yuxia, he was the one hitting the brakes.
But why would the combat veteran be the one opposing the fight? You'd think it would be the other way around.
Because he's a combat veteran. That's the whole point. He knows the difference between a war game and the real thing.
Okay.
The letter calls the PLA a paper tiger. It points to Russia's invasion of Ukraine as this huge, flashing warning sign.
Basically saying, look what happened to them.
Exactly. Look at Russia. They had recent experience and they still got bogged down. We haven't fought a real war since 1979. If we invade in 2027, we're walking into a slaughter.
He was worried about the U.S. and Japan getting involved, too.
Precisely. He was apparently pushing for a much longer timeline, maybe 2035, or just urging restraint in general, but in a system that demands total loyalty to the leader's vision.
Saying, we aren't ready sounds a lot like, I am not loyal.
And that's a death sentence.
This also highlights a shift in the power factions. You mentioned this Fujian gang. Can you explain who they are and why they're replacing guys like Zhang?
Yeah, this is so crucial to understanding where the Chinese military is headed. Xi Jinping spent 17 years of his career in Fujian province.
Which is the province directly opposite Taiwan.
Right. The officers he met and promoted there, they became known as the Fujian gang.
So these are his people from way back.
Yes. They are his loyalists, they tend to be more focused on naval and air power, and they owe their entire careers to him. Zhang, on the other hand, represented the old army faction, the land forces.
So by purging Zhang,
Xi is effectively decapitating the old guard and replacing them with Fujian loyalists who are far, far less likely to question that 2027 timeline.
So you replace the one guy who says, we can't do this, with a room full of guys who say, yes, sir, whatever you say.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
You're trading competence and honest feedback for sycophancy.
And this brings us right to this concept of the dictator's dilemma. If you get rid of everyone who tells you the truth, you end up flying blind.
But the situation described in these reports it sounds even worse than that. It's like the pilot is actively paranoid of the co-pilot. The level of paranoia is just suffocating.
The detail that stood out to me was the rotation schedule. Commanders are moved every 1 to 3 years.
Yes, and that is completely intentional. In a normal military, you want a commander to bond with their troops to build cohesion. Here, that bond is seen as a threat.
Because if a commander gets too popular, he could become a rival.
He could build a power base, so
Yeah.
you move them out before they get too comfortable. Unit cohesion is sacrificed for political security.
Wow.
And it gets deeper. There are reports that guns and ammunition are stored in separate facilities under different chains of command.
Wait, really? So if you need to mobilize quickly, you have to go to 2 different places and get 2 sets of keys.
And probably signatures from 2 different political officers. It's all designed to prevent a mutiny. But in a modern war, that kind of friction is fatal.
Then there's the micromanagement. The letter said Xi signs off on everything. Sources say he personally approves movements as small as a platoon.
A platoon. That's maybe 30 or 40 soldiers.
Yep.
If the chairman of the whole military has to personally approve moving a couple of trucks, the system is just broken. You can't fight a hyper war against the U.S. Navy if you're waiting for a signature from Beijing for every tiny tactical move.
It just creates a culture of paralysis. The Defense Ministry spokesperson said that anti-corruption makes us stronger, but it seems like it just makes everyone terrified to make a decision.
Well, think about the human cost. When a general like Zhang is arrested, it's not just him. His driver, his cook, his bodyguards, they're all instantly replaced or detained.
That's chilling.
It implies that the leader trusts absolutely no one. And that's the dilemma. If you're a general and you see a war hero like Zhang erased overnight, are you going to report that your radar system is faulty?
No, you hide it, you fake the numbers, and you tell the boss that everything is perfect.
And then the boss launches a war thinking everything is perfect and finds out the hard way that it's not.
There's one more name that signals how deep this goes. Zhang Xiaojun.
Right. Zhang Xiaojun was, to put it simply, Xi's enforcer in the military. He was the eyes and ears, the one who kept the loyalty files on everybody else.
The man who watches the watchman.
Exactly. And the rumor is that even he has been sidelined or detained. If that's true, it means Xi has reached a point where he doesn't even trust the people he hired to spy on the people he doesn't trust. The circle of trust has shrunk to a single dot.
Oh, that's a terrifying thought. You have decapitated leadership, a rising faction of yes men, and a 2027 deadline that's getting closer every day.
It is.
So why does everyone keep comparing this to 1971? The Lin Biao incident keeps coming up.
Because history rhymes. In 1971, Lin Biao was at the absolute height of power. He was Mao's designated successor. His name was written into the Constitution. Then, overnight, he was accused of plotting a coup and died in a plane crash trying to flee to the Soviet Union.
That must have been a massive shock to the system.
It shattered the myth of unity. It showed everyone that behind the propaganda posters, the party was tearing itself apart. The purge of Zhang Yuxia is the closest thing they've seen in 50 years. He was the Lin Biao to Xi's Mao.
And we are seeing other little cracks appear, too. What about Hu Chunhua? He's called the spare tire prince.
Poor Hu Chunhua. Yeah, he was once a potential successor, then got totally sidelined. Sources tracked him on a very strange trip to Yunnan province, right as all this was going down with Zhang.
And then the reports of his trip just disappear.
Completely scrubbed from the internet. It suggests the leadership is terrified of anyone who could be seen as an alternative center of power. They don't want the disgruntled military to remember that there's a spare tire in the trunk if the main engine blows.
So let's bring this all together. We have a purge, a mysterious letter, and a looming war date. What's the main takeaway? Does this make war more likely or less?
It creates a really dangerous paradox. On one hand, the brake pedal is gone. Zhang Yuxia, the voice of caution, has been removed. The Fujian gang is in charge, and they're going to tell Xi whatever he wants to hear. So the political will for war is probably higher.
But the actual capability could be lower.
Exactly. The capability is likely compromised by fear, by commander rotations, by the fact that honest feedback has effectively been criminalized.
High intent, low competence. That just sounds like a recipe for a catastrophic miscalculation.
That is the absolute nightmare scenario. A leader who believes his own propaganda, launching a war with an army that's too terrified to tell him they can't actually win.
The open letter ends with a kind of plea, doesn't it?
It does. The writer says something like, "Don't go to such extremes. There's a higher power watching." Whether it's authentic or not, That sentiment feels very real. It reflects this deep anxiety that one man's ambition is overriding the safety of the entire nation.
It's a heavy thought. We look at these authoritarian regimes and we see strength, because everyone is marching in step. But this suggests that uniformity is brittle.
Clay feet, as the saying goes. It looks like a giant, but it might crack under the slightest pressure.
So here's the final thought for you to chew on. The letter claims General Zhang warned that an invasion would fail and maybe even lead to the collapse of the party. With him gone, who is left to say no?
The silence in that room is now the loudest sound of all.
So you have to ask yourself, does an army that's led by fear actually fight better? Or is China's military now paralyzed, not by the enemy, but by the fear of its own commander-in-chief?
That is the question that's going to define the next decade of global security.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll be watching the headlines and the ones that get deleted to see what happens next.
Stay curious.
See you next time.